My name's Tyler Jackson, host of the Play Sheet Sports Podcast, and today we've got another great episode for you. We're going to recap all the action from Week 7, talk about some of the top games, including the one I was at, which was Princeton Greenbrier East, the matchup of the number 2 team in Class AAA and the number 3 team in Class AAA. Afterwards, we're going to get into some of the top Week 8 matchups as playoff time rolls around. We're going to break down some of the ratings and some of the teams you can be looking forward to and seeing how they develop down the stretch in this last month of the season. Let's get to it.
Some see sports as just a game, but it's more than that. It's about building dreams, embracing teamwork, and pushing limits. With every play, every cheer, we're there rooting as partners in their journey. Because at First Community Bank, we believe the youth of today shape our communities tomorrow.
As always, a huge shout out to our friends over at First Community Bank, a huge sponsor of Play Sheet Sports, and the great supporter of all local athletics from here to Raleigh County to Monroe County. They do a great job. So if you're looking to opening checking account, savings account, anything like that, make sure you check out First Community Bank. They've got you covered. We'll go ahead and break into the Week 7 matchups. I want to start off with the game that I covered, and that was Greenbrier East at Princeton. This game wasn't one that I really had on my radar at the beginning of the season. Last year, I think Princeton scored 81 points in winning this game, and it really wasn't competitive. And that's the fun thing about these football seasons and how they develop. You never know what's going to happen throughout, and plans change. And this was one of those games. A matchup of number 2 Princeton. We expected they'd probably be in the playoff and championship hunt. And Greenbrier East, which has been, I don't really want to call them a surprise because they've played a schedule that I would say that they've probably been pretty favored in some of the games. But I think it's how they've started winning. They go to Beckley and they won by 2 scores, and then they beat Oak Hill by multiple scores. So it really kind of put them on the radar, not just that they've been winning these games, but they've been winning them by multiple scores. So this game, becomes a must cover. There are games, obviously, you don't miss the ones like this at a number 2 versus 3. That's in a lot of cases usually like a semifinal matchup right there. But Greenbrier East is much improved. This was my first look at them in person this year. Last year, I got to look at them against Bluefield and some of their defensive struggles and offensive line struggles. And my impression of them was I thought they looked a lot better, and I think a lot of what they wanted to do on offense was tied to the run game. And statistically, that was backed up coming into the game. AJ Godfrey, the running back, playing for the first time. One of the top rushers in the area. He rushed for 660 yards coming into the game. Princeton held him in check. They held him to 30 yards rushing. They held the Spartans to about 40 yards overall rushing. So it was really an impressive showing by Princeton's defense, which has really been challenged in the run game as of late. They did a good job of Godfrey's a downhill runner. He wants to get north-south. They did a good job of stringing him along and making the tackle and making sure that he had to go more horizontal than vertical. And I thought that Princeton's offense is doing a good job of adjusting each time that I see them. But what teams are doing, they see a bunch of different funky looks, and they have for a couple years now. With Dom Collins, they saw a bunch of brackets, and they're seeing a lot of that with Brad Mosser too. But it's creating opportunities for other guys on the offense. And I think that we saw that again this week. Mosser, he had 100 yards for scrimmage overall, 50 receiving, 50 rushing. So they find ways to get the ball in his hands and for him to make plays. But there's always going to be some sort of bracket on him. Greenbrier used to do a good job of making sure they had like a slot defender over him. And when the safety wasn't shaded that way, there was always a linebacker that had eyes on him, ready to take away sort of those inside routes. But what it does is it creates opportunities for other guys, and I thought other guys stepped up. Alex Cox had a really nice game at running back. And I think that just kind of reading the tea leaves there, that he's probably earned more reps with what he did in the Grand game where he had a huge 99-yard run. Because Jake Belcher, I think, only had 4 carries in this game, turned his first carry into a touchdown. So I think maybe they're managing the load there, or they're getting different guys involved, getting them ready. But either way, I thought it was a really good game plan. And even when Princeton was in obvious passing situations, I saw Greenbrier East drop 3. They rushed 3 and dropped 8 quite a bit, which I haven't had a chance to really break down Princeton's film that much. But I don't think a ton of teams have really done that to them this year. So again, they're seeing a bunch of different looks. And these were in situations where, second and long, and, whether it was a sack or a penalty that put them in these situations where it's like, okay, let's force them to make a play and let's rally and tackle and kind of keep them behind the chains. And I think that we're seeing different teams kind of piece together blueprints for how they want to handle Princeton. I don't know if any team in regular season is going to be able to put it all together. But it is interesting that they have to see these different looks and the answers that they come up with them. They ran the ball. They found balance. Despite all this, they had over 500 yards of total offense. I think over 250, obviously 250, over 250 rushing, 250 passing. So just a great offensive output. I think they turned the ball over once on kind of like a scramble drill sort of deal. But I thought it was a good job of them by responding. And Green Bay Race, it turned into a 35-14 game by the end. But there are just a couple plays that, if you take them back, then maybe something changes. Before the half, I mean, it was a one-score game in the third quarter. But before the half, Princeton goes 61 yards or so in about, I think it was just under 40 seconds. And that makes it I believe a 21-7 game at that point. If they don't give that up, then it's 14-7 going into the half, and then maybe it's a tie game somewhere in the third quarter. And there was another pivotal play in the fourth quarter. I posted the clip, and ultimately, like I know there's some fuss about it. There was a pass that I thought it hit the ground. It was ruled a catch. One referee ruled it a catch, one ruled it incomplete. The one overruled him and said it was a completion. But at that point, I there was probably about 5 minutes to go in the game. Princeton led by two scores. I just thought that at the pace that Greenberry's offense was operating at, I don't know if they would have been able to make that up. They just weren't really getting a lot of big plays. And even with their last drive, I think they had a drive with about 8 minutes to go. It just kind of seemed like it was just a struggle to generate big plays. Princeton did a good job of making them kind of nickel and dime down the field. Which again I thought was a good answer because we've talked about Princeton the last couple of weeks and what are their answers for the run. And Graham had a really good ground game attack. Winfield had them tied 14-14, and some people I've talked to were concerned about the run defense. And I think it's important to also note that they've been without Caleb Kaiser, their best defensive player, and first team All-State defensive player, one of the best defensive players in the state. So they've really operated this entire stretch. They've been able to get through that, and he should be back this week against Beckley. They've been able to get through that undefeated. And well, I would say it was a pretty significant stretch for them. Obviously, the Graham game was really competitive. Winfield's a team that's hanging in the back of the playoff rating, so there are points there. And then Green Bay Race, number three team, a lot of points to be gained there. And Princeton, it doesn't matter if you're the one or two seed because either way, you're still getting home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So it's really interesting. But for Green Bay Race, I came away impressed. I think that it was probably. I think Princeton's probably like a score or two better than them still. Um, but yeah, they came in with a pretty good game plan. Kind of bend don't break for the most part. They just gave up some tough plays. And the one thing that I do think is concerning is that Princeton still has a lot of penalties that they're committing. I don't have the exact count from Friday's game, but they have drives that are just being hurt. They have touchdowns that are coming off the board due to penalties, sort of bleeding over a little bit. Not really unsportsmanlike, just a lot of procedural stuff with illegal man downfield, and that happens a lot when you run RPOs. And there's some holding. And that also happens when you're extending plays. Chance Barker was turned into more of a scrambler because of all those drop eight coverages. And when you're scrambling around, there's bound to be holds. But it's tough because that puts you behind the sticks, and you're trying to make up these chunks of yardage that you're losing. So I think that's one thing I'm going to be looking at down the stretch. And for Greenbrier East, I think this is a pivotal point in their season because they have a couple games on the rest of their schedule. I think they finish up with Nicholas County, Bluefield, and James Monroe and Nitro. So it's difficult. That's realistically a stretch where you're going to be challenged each week. I do think that they're better than James Monroe, so I think that's and it's just big AAA versus a double A. They have twice as many kids, so it not too much of a surprise there. But the Bluefield game is going to be, I think, competitive for them. You can't rule out Nicholas County. They're competitive. They have a really good running back and Devin Nash that plays really hard. Their offense is really centered around. So that's a big one if they can get that one. But Nitro, I mean, that's really to me that's their next test of where do you really stack in AAA. Nitro, I think, has just one loss at this point. They have a lot of blue chip players, and when I say blue chip, like D1 kids, wide receiver going to WVU, an offensive lineman that will go to any school in the country that he wants to because he's that highly rated. I think he has offers from the top Power 4 schools in the country. So they have legit talent, and I think that's Greenbrier East. Next, that's probably one of the games that they're looking forward to. And you don't want to overlook the games you have on your schedule because I think the Bluefield game could be a toss up too. Bluefield's really good. They're going to go over there. I think that might be one of the games of the week that week. But they have a very difficult schedule, so I think it's pretty important for Greenbrier East to really rally from this and not think too much of it. Take away the positives. Hey, like this is a one score game in the third quarter. And this is a team that a lot of people expect to be in the state championship game, and we feel like if we do a couple things differently, we're probably in that. But that just kind of going back to the penalties, I also think Princeton, uh, it kept a couple drives alive for Greenbrier East with some pass interferences and just different things to help them move the ball down the field. So we'll see if they can clear that up. But overall, I thought it was a really competitive game. And I just got to give a lot of credit to Greenbrier East. Like I said, a year ago, they have 81 points to Princeton in a game that just wasn't competitive. And, there were a lot of sore feelings about how that one transpired. So it's nice to see the program really kind of turn around so quickly and get everything. And again, they suffered a lot of injuries, but I feel pretty good about Greenbrier. I think that they deserve to be where they're at right now. They're still in position to host a playoff game, but what they do over these next four games is going to determine a lot. So we're gonna come on and roll on to some of the other Week 7 games. And I mentioned Nicholas County. They lost 36-7 to Bluefield, I believe. And I was kind of surprised. Nicholas County is on the slide right now. They lost to Midland Trail last week, which was a huge win for Midland Trail. I'd say that going into that game, Midland Trail probably wasn't favored. They were able to come away with a win, get some key stops when they needed it. So just that's kind of a signature win. And I know Nicholas County's record isn't, the best. I think they've won two games at this point, but they still have good players. Evan Nash is a really good running back. So that I think that was significant. But Bluefield just kind of went in there and kept rolling and rolling. And I think for Bluefield, this is another one of those, okay, like, hey, how are we going? Because I wouldn't say that there was, necessarily a trap game opportunity here, but there was an opportunity to, okay, like, we're going to be tested by a really good player that he's 1,000 yard rusher already. He's had a 500 yard game. You know what they want to do, and they effectively held him to 100 yards. And whenever you get to those points where it's you get such a lead, you kind of take the running game out of it a little bit because when it's like, okay, now it's three scores, we have to start going to the air a little bit to try to recoup things. So again, another big win for Bluefield. They have a lot of key wins that are working for them. That Beckley win is really getting them a lot of points. Their two losses are obviously quality losses because Independence gets points for beating West Side. And then Princeton gets points for beating Greenbrier East, and they're getting a lot of strength of schedule points in that regard. And again, AAA points for beating Nicholas County. So their schedule is really beefed up. They're another one that they have Pikeview on Wednesday. Just a game that got moved, and those are AAA points up for them. I know Pikeview's kind of hanging in the back of AAA. They're 5-1 right now, and a lot of that is because they've beaten AA teams for the most part. But for Bluefield, and you win here, if Bluefield wins out, there's a possibility. I would be hard. I'd have to do the math exactly, but there's a possibility that they could be the number one or two seed. Um, you just look at it. Independence has a couple of tough games in a row here. They have Princeton and they have Barnesville, two very losable games against really good teams. And Bluefield, they close out with Pikeview. Then they'll get Greenbrier East and Riverview. Probably won't get a ton of points from Riverview. But I mean, if you win the Greenbrier Ace game, there's a lot of AAA points to be had there, plus whatever you get from the other teams that you beat that are winning. If Graham keeps winning, if they're able to win and get points for you, James and Rowe, if they keep winning and get points for you, there's a lot of opportunity here. Right now, they're at number 4 in the latest playoff ratings. So I think there's a lot of positives for Bluefield to take away from this, and Nicholas County too. If they're able to get some points and win, I think best case scenario for Bluefield is Nicholas County is able to beat Greenbrier East this week. I don't know if it'll happen, but I think that's probably best case scenario for them. James Monroe dominates Greenbrier West. Greenbrier West is having a really tough season. But James Monroe's quietly pieced together a really nice season. I've talked about it before, but coming into the season, I was skeptical that they'd be able to make the playoffs. And they're not locked in right now. If the playoffs started today, they'd be on the road. But my reason for the skepticism was just because they played a brutal schedule, and I didn't know if there'd be enough wins to get in. And so far, they're answering the call. They beat Greenbrier East, sorry, Greenbrier West pretty handily. Caden Hines had a monster game. Really impressive what he was able to do. And I think he had 3 catches for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, including a pick six. But I want to give some flowers to Ryan Mann. 1,000 yard passer, probably one of the quietest 1,000 yard passers this season. Dual threat quarterback, and I know they lost the Bluefield game, but they're piecing together a really good season. They have some opportunities. They have a big game we'll talk about this week, in just a little bit. But they're quietly piecing together a really good season. They have some opportunities to keep moving up in the standings. Their schedule down the stretch is really difficult. I've talked about like this week they had Midland Trail, who is number 8 in Class AA. You have Greenbrier East down the road. You have Tug Valley, who's one of the top teams in Single A. So they have a really loaded schedule as well. So we'll see how that unfolds for them, but they're able I think that just being able to stack the wins whenever you are, because of how difficult the schedule is going to help you. So to be at the point that they're at now is really impressive for me. And last one, I talk about Beckley wins over Riverside, and I think this is important because we've talked about it over the years. The back half, especially those last 4 or 5 weeks of Beckley's schedule, were brutal. They play some really good teams each year. And this year's no different. So to get those wins where you can, especially in Quad A, where it's a little bit easier to make the playoffs, let's just be honest about it, because there aren't as many teams. I don't know if they've necessarily clinched a playoff berth, but they have to be close to it. But I think the bigger storyline here is that not only are they in position to make the playoffs, but I think they're number 6 in the latest playoff rating, so they're in position to host a playoff game as they can finish the season out strong and kind of buck trends from years past. So again, another good game from Gage Burdett, who I think has really emerged as one of the breakout players this year. I'm working on it for the deep post, but he's one of my candidates for breakout player of the year. He had under 100 yards rushing last year. Now I think he's over 700, and he's probably going to finish the year with 1,000, which is pretty impressive because Beckley had a lot of backs that they needed to replace. They put a lot of expectations on him and a lot of, I wouldn't say necessarily pressure, but he's had some big shoes to fill, the way they want to operate their offense, and he's been a really good, consistent player week to week. So picking up a win over Riverside helps the Flying Eagles. We're going to go ahead and take a break and hear from our sponsors at Raynell Medical Center. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the Week 8 games that are really important, that are really key. We've got a really good slate, and we'll talk about it. Some teams that are undefeated right now that might be suffering their first loss are definitely just they're going to get a game this week. But we'll go ahead and hear from Raynell Medical Center, and we'll be right back.
Most people don't realize that your health starts with your mouth and your teeth. Raynell Medical Center is pleased to offer dental care in 2 locations. Dr. Heather Heister is serving patients in our Raynell Dental Center, located just behind the Health Center. Dr. Darren Wadsworth and Dr. Dustin Yoakum are serving patients in the Maxwellton Dental Center. Our dental staff does a wonderful job of making patients feel comfortable. If you've not had a dental checkup within 6 months, make your appointment today.
Huge shout out to our friends at Raynell Medical Center, a great supporter of local athletics. If you go around to different games at Fayette County, Nicholas County, really anywhere in between Greenbrier County, you'll see them. You'll see signs at ball fields or at stadiums. They do a great job of supporting local athletics and obviously the work that we do. So we're extremely appreciative of what they do. Let's go ahead and hop into the second half of the podcast, talk about some of these Week 8 matchups in our game of the week, which we will be at. We actually got 2 games this week. We'll be at on Wednesday night, which probably when you're listening to this, or maybe Thursday is when you listen to it, or Friday. We'll be at Bluefield where they host Pikeview. This was a game that was supposed to be played on Thursday. Big opportunity for Pikeview. Pikeview's in a tough position because they've won so many AA games that they're really on that bubble for the playoffs in AAA. So they kind of have to win this one to really stay there, just based on the circumstances of that. But just being a small AAA, this is where Pike really kind of got screwed by the system. They probably realistically are a AA school, and they're playing a schedule that I think reflects where they are and what they should be playing. But if you lose to a double A, which Bluefield is, it hurts your standing. But if you win that game, everyone around the state's like, okay, like this is, it's reflected differently, even if it doesn't reflect as much in the playoff rating points. But, for Bluefield, opportunity to stack another AAA points win and to keep that train rolling and possibly host throughout the playoffs, which I think again is their ultimate goal. So yeah, a weird Wednesday night football game, something that we don't see a ton of. But I always say, I like those island games that, those Thursday night games, those Saturday games, allows us to get out and cover it. And this is going to be my first opportunity to see Pike View. They've had a turnaround season. I know they're really happy with what they've done. So I'm curious I'm interested and excited to get a look at them and see how they defend Bluefield. But the game of the week is Midland Trail at James and Rowe. This is a matchup of number 10, James and Rowe. They'll host number 8, Midland Trail. A lot on the line here. I mentioned it in the last segment, but James and Rowe is looking to host a playoff game. It's really just to get into the playoffs. And there are a lot of points here. And I think Midland Trail, the first half of their schedule or so there, I think it was fair to kind of question, some of those teams that they've played. They haven't had the best seasons. I think maybe that's reflected as to why they're 8 with just one loss. But then you look at the Nicholas County game, it's like, okay, like I feel like they're a team that not only have they turned around from last year, but they've also gotten a lot better this year as the season's gone along. I went into the Nicholas County game thinking that they were underdogs, probably by more than one score, and they come away with a win. Jaden Roop, I posted about this on our Play Sheet Sports Facebook page. But Jaden Roop has over 800 yards rushing, and during the Jeremy Moore era, they've not had a running back have over 700 yards rushing in an entire season. So they're already on good track with that. Uh, I'd like to see if he can keep that up. This game's really important on James Monroe's side. We talked about Caden Hines in the last segment and Ryan Mann. Brock Parker is a really good running back that I've probably not talked enough about just because of how well he's played. They at James Rose just kind of kept doing what they do. This game is going to be played on a natural grass field. The Trails played a little bit on turf this year. They have a turf stadium, so really a lot to dissect with this one. More so the ramifications of it. James Monroe, I think, really needs this win just based on how the rest of their schedule unfolds. Because, like I said, they really don't have any easy gimmies the rest of the way. Their schedule is so challenging. So to be able to get this one, and I think with where their schedule's at, I don't think they're in danger of missing the playoffs because I think that they've played a quality enough schedule that it won't be that much of an issue. But if you want to straddle that line of, host the playoff game, I think that they probably have to win this one. And for Midland Trail, you want to keep stacking those wins. You want to get I think this is another signature win opportunity for them. You get after beating Nicholas County, you're coming off a bye. You have an opportunity to get a team. This is a program with pedigree. Everyone knows who James Monroe is. They competed for state championships. They push really good teams. They're an established program. They're a program that if you're looking at the Metro News scores on Friday night and it says Midland Trail beats James Monroe, a lot of people are going to look at Midland Trail and think, okay, that's pretty impressive. We have to seriously consider them and factor them into this playoff picture. So again, just this is our game of the week. Looking forward to getting my first look at both of these teams in person this year. Uh, I'm glad it kind of felt this way. I'm glad that we get this game that's meaningful. I talked about it in the last segment, but I didn't expect that Princeton Greenbrier Ace will be as meaningful as it is. And this is another one that's developed in because Midland Trail's really grown from what's happened over the last couple of years where they've struggled. They've gone through heartbreak. They've gone through some down seasons. So it's good to see both these programs meeting up in a game again that carries some significant weight. I want to move on to Princeton at Beckley. This is another one where Beckley, I talked about it in the last segment again, but their schedule gets really difficult. For Princeton, this is an opportunity to get those quad A points if you win again. Princeton's had their number. I actually don't remember the last time that Princeton's lost to Beckley. It's been probably 5 years at least. But another really good opportunity for Princeton to get playoff points here. And I think one of the things I'm really interested to see is how Beckley decides to defend Brad Mosser. They have good secondary players. They have a big corner in Preston Clary, and they have a really good all-state safety in AJ Thomas. Do you travel? Does Clary travel, or does he stay on maybe a Wyatt Klein or something? Let's single him up there, and then let's put Thomas in a bracket over Moss or somewhere else. Again, Thomas is a really wiry, really good athlete. I'll be curious to see what the game plan is here and how they decide to do that. And another just kind of the schematics of this is, Princeton has a different head coach this time, but Nate Tanner is really familiar with Beckley. He's played Beckley the last couple of years where he was a head coach at Parkersburg South. So there's a lot of history here. He's pretty familiar with Beckley and their players, how everything operates. He knows what to attack, and for Beckley, I don't know if there's really an advantage or disadvantage in that because you've seen this style, this system, this coach before, but now you're doing it against different personnel, and obviously they're familiar with the personnel. The thing that's really hard to parse out through all this is how Beckley will defend Mosser because going back to last year, Mosser didn't play in this game. He started the 1 game suspension for being ejected from the Winfield game. That was the Daniel Jennings game where he had over 250 yards. He had 200 rushing, a 48-yard touchdown catch on a screen. I think Princeton won that game 14-7. So that's really the one thing that I want to see is how Beckley decides to match up with Moss, or are they going to try to do the same thing that other teams have done? Because they like to blitz their linebackers a lot, so that means that you probably don't get as much help as far as bracketing Mosser, and it leaves the middle of the field open. And that's one thing that we talked about in the past that I've written about is when Princeton plays Beckley, the previous regime had kind of levers that they could pull, different motions that they could go to trigger different things that they felt from Beckley's offense, and they did that year over year. They showed me examples of what they did, so I'm curious to see how Beckley elects to defend that. Really, like I said, teams kind of try to put new blueprints in for defending Princeton. Whether it's brackets or this or that, or it's drop eight, what they want to do. Um, and I'm curious to see what Beckley can adopt and what they're able to do. Beckley, they have a big front too. You- They did lose to Bluefield, the common opponent, and they lost to Greenbrier East as well. So Princeton beat both those teams by multiple scores. We'll see how this one transpires and unfolds. But I think there are a lot of storylines here to take away, I think, from how these two teams kind of go down the stretch. If you're Beckley, if you come away with this one and you win, it's a good feather in your cap. I think more than anything, it gives you confidence because you get to that stretch that they've gotten the last couple of years where things start to slide down. They have a good running back. I mentioned in Gage Burdett. They have good skill players as well, and Clary and Thomas. So we'll see how it all transpires. And this is again, there are a lot of things, a lot of threads to follow in this game. Want to move on to Independence at Barnesville. This will be played at Marietta College. Barnesville is a really good team from Ohio. I don't know a ton about them. I do know that they crushed Wheeling Central, and I think their only loss this year is actually the George Washington Quad A team up in the Valley. Lost to them 17-14, I believe. Just talking from Independence all year long, even before the season started, this was a game that they kind of circled. They were like, this is one that's going to really test us. This might be the toughest game that we play all year. A big offensive line, probably the biggest that they'll face all year in their opinion, and a tailback that is legit. A tailback that they feel like extremely wiry, extremely talented, and he's probably about 200 pounds. They feel like they have their work cut out for them. And I think one of the big storylines for me in this game is, Independence might lose this game, but you want to get out of it healthy because you come back and you have the Princeton game. I think it's next week actually after this game. So you want to get out if you're healthy. You don't want to get too banged up. You had your bye last week. You had West Side who you handled pretty easily. So I'd like to think that Independence is probably relatively healthy at this point, just based on those two factors. But we'll see. You want to come out of this Barnesville game healthy because you want to win the Princeton game. I mean, I think there's a lot of bragging rights that come with being the best team in Southern West Virginia, and I think that's going to be a matchup of our two best teams in Southern West Virginia. I had that as my game of the year in the preseason. So we'll see if Independence is able to kind of come out of this one relatively unscathed. Everyone has bumps and bruises, but as long as we don't have somebody playing with broken fingers or anything like that, I think we're in good shape. I think that's going to be the ultimate goal for Independence. Obviously, you want to win, you want to try to hold on to that number one rating in Class Double A. Uh, but I think you try to just get to the finish line healthy if possible. And maybe they win. Maybe they win, and that's like, all right, like this is just another feather in the cap, and you give yourself some more breathing room to drop a game if that ends up being the case that you might lose. I want to move on to Montcalm at Greenbrier West. This is an interesting one because both of these teams are actually in the back end of the Class A playoffs. As the playoffs start today, they both begin. Greenbrier West, I think, is at number 15 right now, and Montcalm's at 13. So still hanging in there, still some opportunity to make the playoffs. So there's gonna be a lot riding on this one. Greenbrier West has been through hell over the last couple of weeks. They've played a very difficult schedule. They had a 6.5 hour bus ride, I believe, to Fort Fry, in a game that really wasn't competitive. They lost to a really good Jameson Road team last week in a game that got out of hand too. So they're looking to get the train back on the track. This is an opportunity to do so. For Montcalm, there's opportunity here. Let's keep building in cushion. They're still seeking that elusive first playoff berth in school history. And it's funny because I think last year's team was probably better than this year's team, just based on the kids they had and the experience. And they're in good position to potentially host a playoff game. So that's kind of the storyline here. Can Greenbrier West land this thing? Without despite all the turbulences they've gone through, and can Montcalm end up getting things on track or stay on track to the point of getting to the postseason for the first time? So sneaky game for ratings points, and I think we're getting to that point of the year where you really have to start considering and looking at this. Speaking of ratings, I talked about it, but Greenbrier East dropped. They were number three. I think they're down to five right now, 4 or 5, and Bluefield up to four. Not a ton of significant movement. I recapped a lot of the ratings with what we had in our games from last week and games we have coming up. So we'll see exactly how it all plays out. But I think to me, Bluefield up to four is a significant one. I mentioned it, but with the games that they have two AAA games and a AA game. I think that there's opportunity, especially depending on how Greenbrier ends the season and these teams that they've beaten. There's an opportunity to get a lot of bonus points and to bump up. Again, it's not going to be easy. Whiteview scrappy. Greenbrier East is really good, and you're going to East to play that game. But we'll see exactly how it all unfolds. I really think there's an outside chance for them to get up to number two at worst if they win out, especially like if Independence, uh, Independence I think is more deserving of that top seed because they won this head to head. But if they drop two in a row to Barnesville and Princeton, that opens the door for okay, hey, we might be able to sneak in just if the teams that Independence is beaten don't get them enough bonus points. So we'll see on that. But those are really the two things that stand out to me. Greenbrier East dropping a little bit. Both these teams, it's funny that they'll end up meeting here in a little bit. They have opportunities to kind of maintain and even move up to the point of hosting multiple playoff games throughout the playoffs. Greenbrier East at five. Realistically, if you beat Nitro, who's hanging around in that same range too, are able to move up. Yeah, I mean, if you get to four, you're looking at hosting maybe two playoff games if you win that first one. In Bluefield, you're looking at hosting all the way to Charleston if you're able to win out. So those are really my playoff rating notes for this week. Independence holding steady. I think if they win, if they split these next two, if they can get 1-1, I don't see how they don't host all the way to Charleston, whether that be as the 1 seed or the 2 seed. and that would obviously knock Bluefield out. Best case scenario, I think for me, I don't want to see Independence Bluefield until Charleston. And I'd hate for that because I think those are the two best teams in Double A. And I think just with Frankfurt and the points that they have, there's a world where we end up seeing that. Now, Frankfurt also is in the business that they could lose a game because they have Herbert Hoover coming to town. That might actually be this. I can't remember which week that is, but that's sometime here in this last month or so. And that's a game that I think will have a lot of ramifications on the Class AA playoff picture. So my only hope is that we don't end up getting Bluefield Independence before the state championship game. Provided that both of them are able to get there. I think those are the two best teams in Double A, but we'll see. But that's going to wrap things up for the Play Sheet Sports podcast. Once again, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Raynell Medical Center, First Community Bank, New River Community Technical College, and Little General. Those companies and those organizations do a great job of supporting local athletics. I talk about it. You go to, any ball field or stadium or venue around the area, and you're going to see signs from Raynell Medical Center or First Community Bank or Little General or New River CTC, which is a new sponsor that we brought on that hosts, in my opinion, the best basketball tournament in the regular season, or I guess invitational is probably the best way to put it because it's not really tournament style. But these, I mean, they put tons of, not only do they sponsor, but even behind the scenes scholarships. They put a lot of effort and time and money into these programs. So if you have an opportunity, make sure you're supporting these businesses that support your kids and local athletics. But once again, I want to thank you for tuning into the Play Sheet Sports Podcast. We'll see you next week.